Thank you very much, Madam Chair, Ranking Member Burr, members of the committee. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to discuss with you again the role of the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases in the research response addressing COVID-19. As I've mentioned to this committee on prior hearings, the strategic plan for research for NIAID involves research on fundamental basic knowledge regarding the virus, the development of diagnostics, therapeutics, and vaccines. For the purposes of today's discussion and my presentation, I'd like to focus on 3 vaccines that you know have been approved through the emergency use authorization for use in the United States. And that is the 2 mRNA vaccines from Pfizer-BioNTech and Moderna, and the J&J vaccine, which is a human adenovirus vector vaccine. As I mentioned to this committee on prior hearings, the clinical trials that proved the extraordinary efficaciousness of these vaccines to the tune of 93 and 94% are very, very clear right now.
To get to the bottom of this pandemic, this supposed surge, and discussions about the Delta variant and what effects that may or may not be having, I want to talk to somebody that has a lot more understanding of this. I'm talking about Dr. Peter McCollough. He's an internist, a cardiologist, and he's published over 30 peer-reviewed studies on SARS-CoV-2. So it is my honor to be joined right now by Dr. McCollough. Dr. McCollough, first of all, thank you for taking the time to join us.
Well, thanks for having me.
Obviously, there's been a real sort of languaging shift in the media. And once again, as we're getting used to, it's as though a script is being sent to every network by somebody. I'm assuming FDA, CDC, NIH are writing a script. It's all the unvaccinated. There's a surge happening because of the unvaccinated. And my question really is, and it's something that we've talked a lot on the high wire about, the potential dangers and what's unknown about the coronavirus vaccines, Pfizer, Moderna, Johnson & Johnson here in America. But what we really have never gotten deep into is efficacy. You know, we hear that it's safe and effective. We've talked to you about the safety before when you were on before. But does this vaccine do what we think vaccines? When we hear the word vaccine, we hear a product that is given prophylactically that keeps me from being infected and keeps someone else. Does this vaccine do that?
No, it looks like it doesn't. And we have really breaking reports from Israel where about 80% of the adult population over age 20 has received the Pfizer vaccine. And in fact, about 80% of those COVID-19 cases, in fact, are among the vaccinated individuals. Among those hospitalized in Israel, it's 60% have been fully vaccinated. The same thing is true in the United Kingdom, where they have about 75% vaccinated, in this case with an array of vaccines, Pfizer, Moderna, and AstraZeneca. About 40% of those hospitalized in the UK, in fact, have been fully vaccinated. What's going on is the Delta variant, and this is one in a sequence of variants that really has arisen as a result of mass vaccination. Now the Delta variant has undergone antigenic escape, immune escape, if you will, and it's avoiding the antibodies of the vaccine and causing COVID-19 illness in individuals. Fortunately, it's milder and it's more easily treated, but the great fear is that the vaccinated will assume they're protected when in fact they're not.
The vaccinated population compared to the unvaccinated population, we can see there's about a 95% difference between those two. Let's not miss the fact that in the vaccinated population, there were 8 infections. That's breakthrough cases, right? We're seeing breakthrough cases becoming a bigger and bigger issue. But let's stay on this topic here. So this is the relative risk analysis, and it's big and it looks good, and this is what's being used to sell parents to line up their, parents now are 8-month-old children and young children, 12-year-olds, young people are lining up now because they believe that this vaccine is 95% effective. But this is only one of the measures that you got to understand. So you got to understand the rest of the story, the full context of how we're being deceived by when they only tell you about relative risk reduction. So the next slide that I'd like to show you tells you a little bit more of the story. So what we need to understand is that we're working from a background population of over 21,000 people. In those two groups, 8 and 160, in fact, 8 infections in the vaccinated group is 0.04% of the vaccinated group got infected. Those are breakthrough cases. Let's not forget that. And 0.8% of the placebo group got infected. Now, let's talk about in absolute terms. If you're considering, do I want to get a vaccine? What is the difference between the attack rate in those two different columns there, 8 versus 160? Well, the absolute risk reduction was only 0.76%. So that's what the absolute risk reduction is. That's a number that you need to take into context when you're trying to make a decision. The absolute risk reduction was less than 1%. It was 0.76%. Isn't that a lot different than 95%? 95% sells vaccines. 0.76% probably sells a little bit of hesitancy, I would think. I would certainly say, okay, well, my risks are pretty low. I'm going to, please put me in the control group because we got an experimental vaccine that we don't have any long-term studies on. Let's never forget that. And we have an experimental vaccine that is showing a lot of deaths and adverse events in the vaccine adverse event reporting system. Now, let's demand the following. Let's see the next slide, please. In this slide, this is what I'm going to suggest should be the requirement for every drug, for every vaccine, forevermore. That informed consent requires reporting of all three of the following metrics. Sure, give us relative risk reduction. Pfizer was 95%. However, put it in context with the background rates. Absolute risk reduction, 0.76%. Now, one of the most important metrics that everybody should understand is the number needed to vaccinate. So the number needed to vaccinate probably gives you the best clarity about the efficiency or the effectiveness of a vaccination. The number needed to vaccinate in the Pfizer vaccine is 132 individuals. Now, 132 individuals, 131 of which will receive no benefits. So 132 individuals have to be vaccinated to protect one person.